Well, welcome everybody. I have Marie-Nicole. Marie-Nicole, please say your name for me. It's Meunier.
Meunier, yeah.
Meunier, a beautiful French sounding name. It's so gorgeous. It matches you perfectly, really. It's just my pronunciation that's a bit like, oh, I was nervous.
It's
Now,
okay.
Marie-Nicole, I have known for a little while now. She is an amazing coach and has many, many skills. And the reason that I have invited her for this podcast today is I've just finished reading her book and I'm blown away. I just absolutely love it. And so I've invited her here today to talk about her book and the contents of that to some degree to give us a bit of an idea. I mean, hearing your story, which I had not known, was really great. And just the whole idea of what you wear and how that matters. Tell us what you can.
Okay. That's a massive open-ended question.
Yeah,
No, look, it all intertwines, and so that's where the layers of complexity over a lifetime have suddenly, ooh, sorry, I hit my mic, have
that's all right.
suddenly meshed in together. So I have been a coach for a few years, certified officially, but
Yeah,
have been advising people for many years. Like I've mentored people in their own business, establishing their own business.
yeah,
And as a creative, so I was a maker and designer, originally a photographer, and had my
yeah,
own business for nearly 10 years. So I've always been in these creative industries and having to do business to my own beat, create my own path. And so I mentored new people to business in that. But my
yeah,
coaching, I actually went into more embodiment coaching and got certification in Dharma coaching, which is finding your soul's purpose. Because I am definitely not a cookie cutter person. And so I don't fit any molds. And even the fact that I make and designed clothing and make clothing, that was never my intention. My mum was a seamstress
yeah,
and I grew up sewing, but I really did think photography would be my lifetime career. And
yeah,
then after having my second child, I just decided to do a job that I could actually do with children in tow. And that's where I brought back the making as my full time work with children. I say full time, I've always blended work with children being
yeah,
around. So embodiment coaching is kind of why the clothing has become so important because I ended up dressing to feel comfortable in my unique physique,
yeah,
which has always been apparent, and the fashion industry never geared clothing towards my physique. So I created my own. I decided from a very young age I would try not to fight myself. I would just embrace it. And that's really where this guidebook has come about. The
yeah,
Empower Dressing Guidebook is really about us understanding ourselves, working with what we've got. And it's not about just accepting and being blasé. It's actually empowering ourselves to feel a sense of worthiness with what we've got rather than looking at what we don't have. And so
yeah.
hope that sums up what it is you were wanting to get
That's
out.
actually beautiful. Thank you so much. I mean, when I first, you know, looked at your book, just from the front, um, it brought to my mind, and of course, I know this is completely not you because you are absolutely your own unique self, and that's one of the reasons why I love you. Um, but it brought to my mind an event or situation when I was first started in my business. I used to run Albury Hypnotherapy Clinic. I did that for about 10 years, and I was a driven mad woman, um, working crazy hours and stuff. And I wanted success. And so I went and did a public speaking course because I was rubbish at that. And I met these women who were very slick, actually, and very successful. Little did I know that they were backed financially by other people. It wasn't so much their own full creation. Um, but I was caught up in this I needed to be something that I wasn't in order to be successful. And that is absolutely not what you are about in any way, shape, or form.
Not
But it,
now, but I've been down that path. So,
yeah, okay.
yeah. So, in the book, I share the story of when I was a photographer and I was wearing a garment that was, I would probably say practical, but I felt powerful. I wore a lot of black. I mean, for
Mm,
me, the black was not so much a power over. It was because I didn't want to reflect color onto like the bride's garment when I was photographing it and things like that. But I would wear very sleek. Um, they were actually corporate brands that I was wearing, and it was mostly Q Design was my brand of choice.
yeah.
Which I used to wear suits when I first got my job. First job out of high school, I was an accounts clerk for a couple of years, and I wore suits in that job. And that just is not me at all now. Like you couldn't even now when I present at business workshops, I still wear things that are flowy and effortless. But I was in that garment and I was pregnant with my first son and my breast expanded because I was breastfeeding and I had to cut the thing off. And I was just like, this is so uncomfortable on so many levels. But I felt strong. I know my journey from a young age, I wanted to be a lawyer at first. I was very argumentative as a child. And I was like, I'm going to stand up for what's right. And then I did my placement in a law firm in Brisbane at the time. I was in my teenage years, and I was covering the biggest case that there was in Brisbane at the time. It was so damn boring, and the office work just was, not the unnatural environment. There was so much about it that I didn't like. That's why I went into photography, which I was passionate about, but I just had that as a side gig. But I still had that power dressing as what I really stepped into until I had my first son. And so he is 22 now. So for the first probably, 10 years of I was 27 when I had him. So I was really someone who saw that powerful dressing and even high collars and tight and everything that just made us women more masculine. And
Yeah.
so I really stepped into that. And then when I had him, I started to wear softer clothing and colors and it was weird. I didn't expect that to come out. And I was like, right, what's this about? Motherhood is literally softening me in so many
Yeah.
ways. And yeah, that's when I started to realize that I actually needed to feel comfortable and empowered, not powerful, and
Yeah.
embrace more of the feminine side. It still took many years to break out of the masculine go getter person that I was. But
Yeah.
now I really have softened in. I'm in late 40s now. I've softened right into what actually serves rather than trying to be something I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exhausting. So,
It is actually, it is exhausting trying to be something rather than just dropping into what we really are.
yeah,
Yeah. And
absolutely. And
that's what I love about, what you've written. It's because that just sort of almost captures it. I think, what did you say? Something about the essence.
yeah, our inner essence being our outer expression and that has really only been in the last 2.5 years that I've connected with that. I mean, I was married for 24 years. I was in a family dynamic where, and not my husband, like we were very much an equal party in our relationship and he was very supportive of what I do. But in terms of extended family, I was constantly having to prove myself and
Mm,
prove that my creative profession was worthy. And so when my marriage ended and I was very confused by why, I really had to go within and I really had to connect back with my essence. And then I started to go back over stories over the years that from childhood, even before I was married, that I just realized were my lessons that I needed to learn so I could connect back to my inner essence and allow that to be my outer expression rather than trying to fit into molds that I just wasn't designed for. And just realizing that's my role in the collective is not to try and, I mean, I've never belonged anywhere. I'm Mauritian, born in Australia to immigrant parents who didn't speak English as their first language, who were uneducated. And I don't say that to put them down, that's just the reality of it. So we were very much a resourceful family and worked with our hands, and I was the first person in my family to go to university. So,
Yeah.
that was a big shift. So I didn't even belong in my family. I was very different in my family. Still am. And so I just really had to contemplate why. Like, what's this journey about? Why can't I belong anywhere? And then I was born in Melbourne, lived in Brisbane, moved to Sydney, then to the country. And so everywhere I've been, I've just kind of stood out like a sore thumb. Like, there's no hiding. So I really held on to the Dr. Seuss saying of why fit in when you were born to stand out? That really, yeah, I started latching onto that maybe 15 years ago and started to let go of the fact, especially living here in the country. It's like, I'm not meant to be like everyone else. And I actually am meant to probably give other people permission to be themselves, whatever that looks like. Not for them to be like me. That's not what I'm here to convince people of. It's just you be you and I'll be me. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting. I live in regional New South Wales, so it's very, dare I say it, patriarchal, and we must all be married, and people have known their friends since kindergarten and all that sort of thing. So people who move into this area really struggle to get traction in terms of social interaction, and I hear that from clients. Actually, it's a big thing. Um, So yeah, that whole thing about fitting in, and you know how it is when you move to a new place, or even when you travel, once you go through the doors in the airport, oh, suddenly it's wide open and you're in the flow.
Yes,
You can't do
absolutely.
that and
Yeah.
without courage.
Well, that's where, I moved here from the city, and I'm also in regional New South Wales, and rural, it's considered rural. And I opened up a commercial space to actually welcome in all the newcomers. That was exactly what that space was for, to help women who had moved to the area, that moved here based on their husband's employment, which was my situation, and lost their own employment opportunities, aligning with their creative professional pursuits. And so I fostered a lot of women through that space in building up their own personal empowerment and feeling like they belong somewhere. And
Mm,
that was a really, it wasn't just for newcomers, it was based on that. But I had a lot of people who had been living in the area for 30, 40 years that then came in and said it gave them permission to feel like it's okay to be who they are, rather than, for 40 years thinking they needed to fit into the culture of the space. And it's not to knock the culture, it's just the
no,
acceptance of we all have our unique thread to add to the collective tapestry. We're not meant to be the same. Like,
yeah,
I
that's
like
right.
to use the analogy of in wild nature, like the bird who collects a seed and drops a seed is not the one that pollinates the flower. So, we all have our part to play in what we need as a collective. So rather than judging each other, let's embrace the difference and
Yeah,
run with that.
exactly, exactly. Um, I was fascinated in your. Sorry, is it okay if I bounce over to
Yeah.
um, the clothing and the
Yeah.
things like that? I mean, it's reading through your book has actually got me motivated, and I actually offloaded 4 dresses yesterday. They have left the building.
Awesome.
Um, you speak in there about fabrics and vibrational frequency, and I was loving that.
Yeah.
So, would you be happy to talk about that? The different qualities of fabric, what you think is good,
Yeah.
Um,
Well, when I moved out of photography and into artisanal work, I was screen printing. So I didn't want to be making garments for people. That wasn't the intention. I was making tea towels and serviettes and aprons. And I was screen printing onto them. But then there was so much of that out in the marketplace that I just started then working with old blankets. And making instrument cases and things out of old blankets. But I was very selective when it came to the screen printing and even the fabric that I lined my bags with, because I then started working with kangaroo leather, still lined in linen. I selected the fabrics based on them being eco-friendly because I have a big eco-friendly stance on everything that I do. And then I started to think, when I wear linen, I actually feel really good. Like I generally run hot. My constitution is that I run hot, and living in Brisbane, I really struggled with humidity. And so the choice of fabrics for me personally to stay cool and was really important that I understood what worked for me. I didn't know about the frequency when I chose those fabrics. I have only in recent years come to understand that. But I also, when I started making clothing upon customers' request, because what I was wearing they loved and they asked me if they could order it. So I then, when I decided to bring clothing, I just went, I have to focus on the fabrics that make me feel good, which I'm pretty sure are going to make others feel good, because linen has a thermal quality regulating aspect to it, which fine merino does too. And so they were my base fabrics. And then I discovered that there's actually a frequency to this. And then it makes sense once you hear it, because everything is energy and everything has a vibration. And
yeah.
even if you have, like, they take the frequency of a flower and it actually emits a certain vibration, and then a bee is attracted to that vibration. And once the bee gets there, the frequency changes. It's like we can prove all of that, but we have not really looked at, so how does the fabric that I'm wearing affect me? And so when I discovered that polyester actually reads at 10 hertz, which is pretty low when you think about the fact that a sick person reads at 15 hertz and organic cotton 110 hertz. So just the difference between wearing organic cotton and polyester is huge. But linen and wool read at 5,000 hertz. So that's a massive difference. And it really started to resonate with me why I would be in people's presence, even in the last 2.5 years when I'm going through one of the hardest transitions of my life, and they'd say, I love your energy. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going through this massive life transition. Internally, I feel like I'm falling apart. And you're telling me you love my energy upon first meeting me? I was like going, imagine if I was feeling good. It's like you wouldn't be able to sit next to me. And then I
Yeah.
started to think maybe it's actually not just me. I mean, I do a lot of work on my energy internally and mentally and physically, spiritually. But then I started to think maybe it's the frequency of the fabric that I'm wearing that they're feeling, and that's amplifying. And on top of that, it's having that side effect of actually increasing my vibration, my energy, so helping me heal just by what I'm wearing. I was like, right, that's really powerful. So yeah, I just think first thing, if you can feel it, you feel the touch of a polyester compared to the touch of a natural fiber, and your senses will tell you that it actually feels better to engage with a natural fiber. So that's one of the first things I try to encourage people to do. Just look at the fabrics you're wearing. You don't even have to changing your diet, yes, is a very important thing. Exercising, all very important. But if you do all of those things and then you cover your body in a fabric that brings down your frequency, then it's just undone all of that. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It's a whole it's a whole package, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm,
And even to the point with I started to look at, well, what about feng shui? And we
mm.
talk about feng shui for our houses and the directing of energy and even the redirection of EMF frequencies. And so it's like, well, potentially how we drape ourselves can also do that. So the lines of garments that we're wearing and the way that energy flows over us. And I mean, I've always preferred a scarf. I used to do tutorials for in the shop because I sold garments, and I do these little tutorials on how to wear things, and I'd show the difference between when you just get a big scarf and you put it around your neck and it's got like these harsh lines. It just stops and it just makes you look heavy, feel heavy. And if you pulled one corner of the scarf and just let it float and then wrap it around, it creates this delicacy and layers. And then I was like, actually, the flow of energy, it's like a river. If you watch water butt up against a hard edge, it can't get around it. So it just keeps pushing and pushing and it overflows. So maybe the way we wear our scarf actually helps energy move around our body as well. So that's taking it so far that, that I feel like people might go, oh, it's too much to think about. But, we think about it in terms of organic foods and how we lay out our furniture to not block the flow of energy. So our bodies house our soul and our energy bodies. So how we actually dress ourselves creates that, same kind of flow or not. So
Exactly. It makes so much sense. And I mean, even things like colour have a big impact. You were saying before about wearing black made you feel powerful. Um,
I still wear black. I mean, I've got a black hat on and you can't see, but I've got black harem pants on at the moment. But it's just, and some days I actually find the cycles of the moon. I also find when it's around a new moon, I have a tendency to wear an indigo and a black, but I still end up softening it a little bit with a flax or a cream top with that. But it's just in terms of color, I was drawn to particular colors at different times and wondered, okay, so what's the meaning of that color? And so when I started to look into the color, like when I even chose my logo for the business, Creators Nest logo, I was really drawn to turquoise. And I was like, not that turquoise was related to a particular chakra system, which the other colors I include in the book talk about the chakra system, but it's that whole symbolism of wisdom, tranquility, protection, and good fortune and loyalty. And I was like, that actually is what Creators Nest is about. It's about fostering all of that. So, there are days where I feel like my identity is shaken by an experience and I'm drawn to a yellow top. And that has to do with our solar plexus. So it's like, maybe the days that today I'm wearing orange, not because I'm trying to purge toxic energy, but it is. But I was just drawn to it. And I was like, why is that? Yeah. And it's like creativity and passion and emotional expression. And that's what this conversation is about. So, it's like, if we want to embody something, then we can choose to wear a color that helps us do that as well.
yeah, exactly. I was interested, you spoke about, oh gosh, so many things. My brain's just had a little fluffy moment. Um, you've talked about the ethics of creators.
Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah.
The cost of what people are being paid to create clothes. I remember I had a little job post COVID to get me over a little bump, and wonderful experience. And a lot of the people who worked in that space were buying clothing from Temu.
Yeah.
And, there's all this chatter. And in the end, they stop talking about it around me. They go, oh, no, no, don't tell Karen. She won't buy anything from there. I mean, just the immediacy of it, the low price. And, I mean, you talk about our
Yeah.
own ethical stance in when we're purchasing.
Absolutely. Like my dad used to give my kids Kmart gift cards and for birthdays, Christmases, and I actually said to him, Dad, can you please stop? Like, can you just send Target, at least Target has some organic fabrics and things. But we'd walk into Kmart and we don't even have it. We didn't at the time have a Kmart in Yass. I had to go to Canberra for it. So I used that as a really good excuse for him and say, yeah, we have a Target in Yass, just give them a Target card. Now it's turned into a Kmart, which is really disappointing. But I'd walk into Kmart and you'd see like piles of $3 t-shirts, just $3. And you'd look at, and I, knowing as a maker who buys fabric and makes, and just the time that goes into it. My mum worked in a factory when I was a child in primary school. She worked in a factory in Melbourne. And those conditions were pretty good compared to what these $3 t-shirts that are being produced, and people being locked in factories in Rana Plaza and having the collapse. And to give us a $3 t-shirt, which does not even last and goes out of shape, and then you throw it into the bin, or you put it into the recycle op shops, and the op shops are just overrun with rubbish fabrics and garments like that they're just bagging them up and throwing them out. So it's like, if we spend more on the garment and we know that the person who made the garment has also been looked after, that energy transfers to the garment. Because those factory workers that were being locked up or mistreated to create these cheap garments for us started actually sewing in little messages into garments to reach out for help. So this has been going on for so long. I mean, it's out in the open now. But when I first started working with fabrics like this, and I would tell friends who shopped at places like Kmart, like, how would you feel if here in Yass we had a factory that locked families in the factory so that they could produce cheap items for our needs? And so one of the people was like, where's this happening in Yass? And I'm like, see, your reaction straight away is one of defense for the people in Yass, but it's happening over there in India, and we're not doing anything about it because we just look at the price. And at first for me, it started with jeans, because when I was doing my research on fabric, and I learned that there was satellite imagery of the runoff of the dye into the waterways of these communities that were producing jeans cheaply for us, but they were so toxic that the farmers, even growing the crop, was getting sick and committing suicide. And then you could see the runoff of the actual production, just this blue sea around these communities. And it's like, someone's paying for it. So instead of us going, oh, well, it's a cheap price and I can get more, why don't we go, actually, why is it a cheap price? Who's actually missing out? So I, in the book, include brand recommendations, and one of the recommendations is for a denim company that pays, and there's a lot of companies doing this now, but it was one of the first to really look at the living wage. And the living wage is not just based on paying people enough to get by, because in these communities they often look after their families as well. They've got elderly parents that live with them and children to care for, and not everyone can work. So they pay enough to cover the cost of the family, not just the individual. They empower the individual to run the factories. So it's not like a top-heavy Western company that's coming in telling people what they need to do, or agents on their behalf. Yeah, it's actually empowering communities as well. So the reason I brought that up in the book is partly because of the energy as well. Like, anything that's got that kind of energy of suffering and anxiety, that flows into us as well. So, if you just want to look at it from a purely selfish perspective, then buy ethically made for yourself. It's like...
Exactly. And I mean, the Hare Krishna people, they do that with food. Is putting the love in the food. It just makes sense, doesn't it?
It
Anybody
does.
who's ever done Reiki knows anything they touch, once they've got that flow of energy, once they're aware of the flow of
Yes.
energy that's moving through them, whatever they do, they're
But that's
creating.
where our Western culture has disconnected us from a lot of that, because we also don't see the flow and effects of our waste. If we actually had to dump everything in our own properties, we would be a lot more discerning with the decisions that we made in not just our clothing, but what we eat and what we discard. And living on farms actually really brought that to my awareness, in terms of, we didn't have garbage collection. So we did have to take our rubbish to the tip, and you would actually see what was being thrown out. And so we started to separate our rubbish into, we composted as much as we could. And then when you're composting it in your own soil, you don't want to put toxic things in your own soil. So you really become aware. And that leads me, and it's not a question that you've asked, but it's just prompted something, from living on the farms and seeing the culling and dumping of kangaroos into gullies. That actually led me to start working with kangaroo leather, because I was like, part of the pest control was they were given certain number of tickets to be able to just cull the kangaroos that are destroying their crops, but they're dumping them in gullies, and that was creating toxic waste and flow-on effect. I mean, wild boar is a problem, and wild boar actually feed off the carcasses, and so it just kind of flows on. So it's like when people at markets would say, I'm vegan, particularly at markets, more so than in the shop. In the shop, they were a little, because it was my space, it was not as easy to confront me. I still have people that did, but in the markets, I used to get it a lot. And I would say, well, that polyurethane replacement that you're using as pleather instead of leather, like that's petroleum based. So, and that will never break down. So let's really look at this from a holistic perspective of maybe we should go back to a hunter-gatherer kind of lifestyle, and we would be a lot more respectful. But
Well,
yeah,
it's very permaculture, isn't it? I mean, the cycle. That's
yes.
beautiful, I think. I love that you've actually explained why you went into the kangaroo leather. That's gorgeous.
Yeah,
I
and
love
it's
that.
not because I advocate animal cruelty. I love animals. I'm a big animal person, but it's just, I think, I try and use the vegetable tanned leather rather than chrome tanned. So I'm still, but not everything is possible. Like in terms of threads, like I still do use some polyester threads because the natural threads just break too quickly. But I would prefer, if I could, do everything natural and have it live out its cycle, and then
Mm.
know that I could recycle it. Not even recycle it, compost it, and I know that it's safe to put that there and make another one. But that's the other thing. We also want things to last forever. I have a friend, and this has got nothing to do with clothing, but a friend who made me a wire bowl for my 40th birthday. And he's a sculptor, and he stopped by here the other day, and he's like, I can finish that bowl so that it does, because I have it outside on an outdoor table. I could put a finish on it so it doesn't perish. And I was like, but everything comes to an end in its cycle. So when that bowl actually perishes, it's like, I don't need it to last forever. And it's doing really well. And it's got this beautiful patina to it. And it just made me think, we're so used to things not wanting things to come to the end of a cycle. That's the natural part of life.
And there's beauty in that.
Yeah, I
There's
agree.
beauty. Even, for us as women, the whole thing about aging, oh my God, I see these beautiful young women who are injecting things into their face because they've got a little line.
Yeah,
And then I see an old woman whose face is lined from years in the sun, and when she laughs, her whole
yes,
face
yeah.
moves and is alive.
It's
And I
like
think,
the map of her life shows on her
yes,
face. Yeah.
exactly. Which one is more beautiful?
Yeah, I agree. And people, I'm sure, I've been asked what my skincare regime is, because I turn 50 next year and I still don't really have wrinkles, and it's not because I do anything to prevent it. I've never tried to prevent aging. You can't see my grey hairs, but I do have them, and I'm quite happy to. But I actually believe that it is, I've focused more on living youthfully rather than being concerned about aging. And and that has potentially kept me more vital and not without me even trying. And I've
And
always drunk a lot of
5,000.
water. And my 5,000 hertz fabric, exactly. It's like, because I focused on looking at the beauty of everything around me, and even what you were saying in terms of the preparation of food. Like, I take my food preparation as a sacred act. And so, maybe that's why I haven't got the wrinkles, because I'm not worried so much.
Exactly. This is intentional living, isn't it? It's
Yes.
absolutely intentional living, being fully present to what's there.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just going to jump over because I keep wanting to ask you this question. Silk.
Yes.
Now, can you tell me, is this a good fabric or not?
I have looked into it and I can't say I can retain the information that I have found on it. But from what I understand, I mean, in terms of vibration, it is still a natural fiber. I don't know what the process of farming silk is like. I don't know how the actual creatures are treated. So I would, if I was to investigate that further, that's what I would be looking at because it's a little bit like farmed salmon, you know, like and even animals that are mistreated in cages. So I feel like maybe silk is one of those areas where if if it is that the energy in the creature itself is suffering, it's going through a process of suffering, then I would avoid it. But in terms of a natural fiber, I've always struggled a little bit with silk. I don't know what it like. I wear it occasionally, but I know that there have been some times where I've found it uncomfortable, and I don't know what the reason is. Like I felt hot in it. I felt like it hasn't breathed as well, and I wonder if that's the weave rather than the
Yeah,
fiber
okay.
itself. So I
Yeah.
I, I can't answer that one clearly. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's only
that's
an
okay. And
assumption.
look, it's just, I mean, I've just dumped that in on you, but it's just gone round in my mind a couple of times, and I thought, oh, I'll just ask you
Yeah,
because I noticed that you didn't mention it, and I suppose I thought, given that it's a natural one, but interesting to think about, those
little worms and how
little
they're
worms.
treated.
Yeah,
I know,
and
and that's
worms are important. I love worms. I've got
the
worms in
other
my.
thing I didn't put in there is bamboo. Did I? I don't think I included it.
No.
And
Oh, I think
I,
you did mention it.
yeah, so when I first really researched fabric, I did that. It would be my second son's just turned 17 and he was a baby when I started researching fabric. So at the time, I chose not to work with bamboo because the research I discovered was they use such heavy chemicals to break down the fiber to get it
Yeah,
to a point where they can create fabric, that the chemicals then get transferred through the fabric. So even though it's a sustainable material to grow, the production is not to turn it into fabric. And in recent years, I actually started using bamboo, like buying products that were made out of bamboo, and only because Jane Goodall was the face of a brand. And I was like, Jane Goodall, if she's behind that, surely then she would know that there's the processes maybe changed. But only recently I've heard that the chemical part is still a big part of it. And so I'm like, oh, I need to go back and research that again and see what the modern day version of creating bamboo fabric is because yeah, I mean it gets so complicated and that's why I've only included in the book what I actually know, what I've
yeah,
worked with, what I understand. And
yeah,
silk and bamboo are two. I mean, I didn't put hemp in there either, and not because I believe the production of hemp and into fabric is fine, but again, 16 and a half years ago, when I looked into hemp, the production of hemp into fabric, I didn't like the finishes. They
yeah,
were a bit rough and rugged for my screen printing, whereas linen had this beautiful range of lightweight, easy to screen print, and then more slubby, heavier, open weave, natural. So there was just a broader range in the offering of linen. But I
yeah,
do now, I have used hemp in more recent years because they have started to refine the processes of creating a broader range of finishes.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important, isn't it? I mean, we don't think about, I'm speaking generally, the general population does not think, oh, it's natural, therefore it's good. But that
Yes.
what goes into the earth, I mean, that's where we grow our food. That's
Yeah.
what we are relying on for long-term life for our children, our grandchildren, the continuation.
Exactly.
Wow. I look at the weather right now, what's happening in the world weather-wise, and I go, well, we have been asking for it, you know.
Yes. And that's the thing is that, the earth will continue. it'll eject us. It'll just go, you humans are not good for my rock. So moving
No.
on to the next species. I got rid of the dinosaurs for a reason. So,
Yeah.
so in the end, it's ourselves that we're working against.
Yeah, that's right. It's it's interesting, isn't it? Like I remember, part of what's come to my mind reading your book is about the quantity of things. Now, I live in a very small house. Apparently, it's smaller than my brother's garage.
Well, his garage is too big then, isn't it?
Yes, it is actually. He has way too many toys. But so when I moved here, I offloaded a lot of things and I'd actually started to change some of the things I bought because I knew that I was going into a place where I'd have little space for clothing. And so 7 handbags was actually out of the question. So I offloaded those. And I started to look at things like minimalism. And what's that Japanese lady's name? I can't remember her name now. It doesn't matter.
Oh,
You
Marie
know,
Kondo.
yes, yes, looking at, all the things. So, and I loved the title of your chapter, cull and curate your wardrobe. I thought that was super cool. And I thought, I'm curating. I felt very artistic.
Yeah. Well, that's our life. We are creators. That is, even people who don't think they are creative, they are creating something in
Yeah,
whatever, even as an engineer. So the whole curate your wardrobe is, again, that inner essence being your outer expression, because I say we are our own walking billboard. We actually promote what we believe in, and we don't even have to open our mouth when we walk into a room, and people can look at us and they can see. If you're wearing Kathmandu only, people are going to know you're an adventurer. So you don't have to say, this is what I believe in. And if what you are wearing doesn't align with what you believe in, then that's a bit of a problem, right? And I was watching a documentary where and it was a beautiful documentary, but one of the ladies they were interviewing was, I think she was a scientist, but she was wearing a jacket which I'm sure was polyester and had down in it that actually wasn't ethically sourced. Because the way that they get down for some of those jackets is it's quite torturous for the ducks. And so you really want a down jacket that has been harvested with consideration for the bird, not a bird that's plucked live, So a lot of that cheap production stuff has that energy in it. So it's considering that, what we wear is actually a part of our message to the world. And so that's where the colour and curate is what is essential for me to live the lifestyle that I want to live and to move through my days in a way that is effortless and practical. Like I lived on farms. They used to laugh at me on farms wearing my flowy linens, but I would layer my clothing. So I have a pair of jeans, a singlet, and then I have an overlay of a flowy garment. And if I have to climb over something, I take my overlay off and I climb over it. I mean, I drive a ute. I'm constantly in and out of the back of the ute. I set up a tent and and I hike. and I just take off the flowy things that'll get caught on fences or trees and do what I have to, and then I put it back on. It's like,
yeah,
so that's where curating your wardrobe in a way that aligns with your lifestyle, represents your ethos, and actually makes you feel good. That's what I'm trying to encourage people to do.
yeah. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Wow. I mean, you've got your own very unique style. And I know that it's real because no matter how many times I, catch up with you, you are still presenting and I still see some version of, what I'm seeing today. Um, has it taken you a long time to develop that or to bring that through? Have you got
I think it has taken me to understand myself. rather than I used to I used to try and kind of not fit the trend, but make the trend fit me. So I
Yeah.
was very much aware of what the trends were. And even that in itself, I found to be frustrating because trends are often short lived. And so I used to have a friend who every season would redo her whole wardrobe and she'd create a capsule wardrobe every season. And for me, that's exhausting. So
Yeah.
I would just like, well, rather than trying to have a wardrobe for the season or a wardrobe for the year, what if I try and build a timeless, effortless wardrobe that I know aligns with who I am? And so that's why it's actually easy for me to get ready in the morning. I intuitively dress most mornings. I just open up my wardrobe and go, what colors? And I know they all layer well, and I it doesn't take a lot of I don't need to try the whole outfit on and go, does this work together? I've already worked that out at a foundation level. And so
Yeah.
yes, it's taken many years to work out what that means for me, what shapes, what cuts. If you saw me on a daily basis at the moment, I am almost every day wearing one of these singlets. I have them in several colors that I have made because I can wear this singlet with whatever bottom and I know it's going to work. And sometimes I tuck it in, sometimes I have it out, sometimes I have it covered, and it's just easy. So it might look like I take a long time to get ready, but I don't. Because
That sounds good.
yeah, because
Yeah.
I couldn't be bothered spending all that time trying to work out what to wear in the morning, spending an hour trying to decide whether or not something actually suits. And of course, at time of cycle, we have our body feels different. So you just know all that outfit's going to work whether or not I'm on my cycle or not. It's just as what pants I put with it or what skirt I put with it. So it has taken a long time in terms of that, but what actually I found harder was the period of time that I went through where I decided I wasn't going to buy anything new and I was just going to buy secondhand only. That was
Yeah.
really challenging because nothing in the fashion industry was really made for my physique. So
Yeah.
to only buy secondhand, I was constantly readjusting garments. I was recutting necklines, sleeve lengths, and I was like, and that was so I was buying them cheaply, but I was spending a lot of time. And
Yeah.
when I say buying them cheaply, I would go to designer op shops as well and buy there, so I knew that the quality was still higher. But I was always reworking something, so I decided I'm better off to make garments out of fabrics in designs that work for me, and then just have less that actually works together. So
Yeah.
I mean, look, like I said, I'm nearly 50, so I don't know exactly how long it took for me to get to this point, but it's been a journey of a lifetime. So,
Yeah.
yeah, one that's
Oh,
worth, I think, has been worth embarking on because I feel the other day, on New Year's Eve, actually, I went to Wee Jasper Reserve with my dogs, and I planned to go swimming with the dogs, but the river was so low we couldn't swim. And I was lying on this picnic blanket and I was wearing like a denim skirt, one of my singlets. I had my bathers underneath. And I just felt so at ease that I didn't really care what anyone else thought about whether or not I was appropriately dressed. I was so comfortable. And I was like, that's such a good way to feel. Like, I
yeah.
have not had that most of my life. So I feel most at peace now than I have in a very long time. So, yes, that's probably taken a while to get to that point.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. Is there anything else we need to talk about
The
that I have
only
missed?
thing that you probably haven't asked on, which you had said in a previous conversation you enjoyed talking about, and that was jewellery.
Oh my God, yes. Yes, thank you for mentioning that. Oh,
I want to hear from you first, though. What is it about the jewellery that, yeah, what did it spark in you?
oh, what does it spark in me? Well, my my jewelry reminds me of things. Like for example, this ring here that I'm wearing, I looked at that. It's not an expensive piece, but I looked at it and I was doing a bit of a dive into, I've always been a bit worried about the whole ET thing. and not 100% comfortable. And I grew up in a place where, um, as a teenager, I lived in Mount Beauty, and there were certain places that you wouldn't drive in the hills at night because, your headlights would stop, the
Wow.
car would stop, and people used to say things about ETs and things. But I've been delving into that a little bit,
Yeah.
and I'm not scared now.
Awesome.
Thing is, I went into the Goddess Emporium, as a crystal shop close by here, and I saw this happen to be on a tray they had pulled out they were working with, and I saw it and I went, oh my God, that's deep space. That is so
Yeah.
galactic. And I had to have it because at the moment I'm exploring things outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so I like to put that on. Um, and it reminds me. So I use the jewellery for its beauty, its uniqueness. I don't want to be the same as everyone else. This little combination here, it looks like a wedding ring, really, but it's not. Um, I've got a little bee because I'm a beekeeper, and I love that. And the other one is actually from Hawaii. So when I put those on this hand, I am reminded of a few different things. One is my commitment to myself,
Yeah.
because people get into all this thing about not being in relationships and they're married to themselves and all this hoo-ha. But on some level, I did do a ritual many years ago. This is probably way too much information, um, about where I actually did a ritual and I did a commitment ceremony to myself. And I purchased a ring with diamonds in it because I've been married a couple of times but never engaged.
Wow.
And I thought, rip off. I need a diamond. So I bought myself a diamond ring
Good on
and
you.
I used that in my ceremony. But I don't need that now. But so when I put these on, I am reminded of my commitment to myself to be present and true to myself. And I loved my time in Hawaii. I've got beautiful friends there. Um, I first got my motorcycle license. There are lots of wild woman things I did there.
Awesome.
And the bee is all about the goddess and femininity. And I am a beekeeper now, or a servant to bees is probably more true. Yeah, so and these things here, and even my earrings, they're from a designer in uh, the Gaza Strip, actually.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
yeah, but so they are symbolic. That's what I'm trying to say. They mean something to me, and they bring my attention to what is important. And so
Yeah.
I put those things on, and it moves me into that place of honouring those things. So
Absolutely. And see, that's the setting the conditions, which we've
yeah,
talked about outside of this conversation. And that is, it's no different to preparing soil for a seed to germinate. That's how I see jewelry as well. And I actually am often asked if I'm a jeweler, and
ah,
was in the shop because I would sell other people's jewelry. I mean, I make feather and leather earrings, so I did make a bit of jewelry, and I did a bit of leather. I do leather work like watch bands and braiding.
yeah,
But in terms of all the metal work, I my jewelry is all medicinal, or it's meaningful, and it's intentional. Going back to that whole intentional living, even jewelry has its purpose. And in a session we had together the other week, I was telling you about my snake ring and how when my marriage ended, 24 years of one identity, I decided I needed to wear a ring that helped shed the layers that no longer served, and I wore a snake ring, and then I took that off and I put a ring on which actually represents my past and present are always connected. I am not trying to shed my past. I'm carrying that with me forward. And then I put my snake ring on my thumb. And while I was down the coast, I said to you at the time that I didn't feel like it was going to break. I didn't have that sense, but I do remember it feeling uncomfortable. And I'd been wearing it on my thumb for several months. Like I bought this ring back in, I bought it around what would have been my 25th wedding anniversary. So it was like back in April, and I was wearing the snake ring on my thumb since then. And it was only in the last maybe month that it started to feel a little uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, this has been there fine for ages. And then while I was down the coast, it just broke
Yeah.
and had no sign of about to break. And I took that as a representation, enough layers, enough shedding. Now it's just time to start the next cycle. And so, it's all, I just agree with you that jewellery really is a representation. It can be, not for everyone, but I
No.
use it that way. All of my jewellery has something meaningful to it. Now, I've got a little story, which I just thought about. This little pendant that I wear around my neck is a spinner. It's a little quartz crystal.
Mm-hmm.
But the chain, and I bought that for a chain that my husband had bought for me for our first wedding anniversary, and he intended on also buying this little spherical, sparkly pendant, but never got around to the pendant. Like, he didn't at the time buy the pendant, and he said, I'll buy that next time. And so for 24 years, I had this chain without that pendant that I was supposed to one day get. Like, no, I'm not bitter about that, but it was just I ended up putting other charms on the pendant, right, on the necklace. And then after my marriage ended, I was like, I really like the idea of the sphere. Like, I wanted something spherical on that, so I ended up buying this little spinner, and I play with it all the time. But for the first maybe 6 months of wearing that on that necklace, the necklace kept breaking, just kept opening. It wasn't actually broken, but it kept opening, and the little spinner fell off constantly. I was in the shop, and I had 2 stories that I used to walk up and down in the back entry to the car park, and I'd often find this little spinner just on the cement steps, and I was just like, oh, there it is again. So I'd pick it up and I'd put it back on the necklace. And then one day I was at Aldi with my youngest son, and we got out of the car and walked into the shops, and I got into the store, and I was like, oh, my necklace is just hanging around my neck, but where's that little spinner? Oh, I think I've lost it for good now. And so I went outside looking on the driveway. I couldn't find it. We went through the whole supermarket, and the manager of the store knows me. And she's like, what are you looking for? And I said, oh, I've lost my little pendant. And it's just like this little spherical thing. She said, if we find it, we'll give it back to you. And I was like, okay, it's all good. Let it go. Maybe that pendant isn't meant for me. We did our shopping. We walked to Aldi, is so busy, like cars coming and going. And there was my little spinner on the driveway where lots of cars would have driven, and it wasn't damaged. And I looked at my son and I said, it's not the pendant. It's the necklace. I shouldn't be wearing this necklace. So we went, and I still get the shivers thinking about it. It was so powerful because that had opened up so many times, that necklace. And I went to the jeweler, who I know quite well too because I do love jewellery. And she's like, I can fix that little catcher if you want. I said, no, I don't want the necklace. Like, I just need a similar length necklace that's not that one for this pendant. This necklace has never fallen off. And I was like, these are little signs that we are sent that we often ignore. And it's like, you need to let go of that past connection. And
Yeah.
it wasn't even resentment or anything. I was still wearing the necklace he'd given me. It just wasn't meant for me. So, yeah.
I Yeah, we're constantly being shown, aren't we? And constantly being guided.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. I love
Just
that
I've learned to
story.
tune in. Yeah, I do too, because it has, and I also now wear a pendant on here with the spinner that is the Eye of Horus, because my life's work sphere in the gene keys is the gift of farsightedness, and I have really had to look at everything that has happened in my life from the perspective of farsightedness, and the Eye of Horus is related to the peregrine falcon, which connects to that sphere in the gene keys. And the peregrine falcon, again, this is a little eagle, but I do have feathers from a peregrine falcon that I also worked with and made a hairpiece out of. Again, for that, connecting to the energy of these things, that it's intentional. All my jewelry is intentional. That's, the whole little eagle feathers on my earrings. I mean, that was a roadkill that I picked up. And that day I was actually hanging out washing, and there were 2 little eagles circling over the clothesline, and we went out to the highway, and there was a freshly hit little eagle. And I said to my son, like, I wonder if that's one of the ones that I was just connecting with while I was hanging the washing. So we brought it back home, and a few days later we were driving out again, and there was another bird on the side of the road that I made him, because it was on the passenger side. I said, oh, is that a kookaburra? And he's like, I don't know, let's pull over and have a look. Yes, that looks like a falcon. And that was a peregrine falcon. So I was like,
Wow.
right. We took it back home and I put it in a container, and I'll tend to that later. I said, it's such a shame it wasn't a kookaburra. I've never had a kookaburra. And he's like, oh, Mum. And I was like, I was kind of hoping it was a kookaburra. So we went into town, did what we needed to, and we were driving back on the other side of the highway, turning off into our street, into the main road that comes to our street. And there on the side of the road was a kookaburra. And I was like, look at that, there's a kookaburra. And he's like, oh, Mum, now you're actually manifesting dead birds. And I was like, the universe is gifting them to me because they know that I have so much respect. And so I ended up making a hairpiece with a peregrine falcon and the kookaburra. I was like, yeah.
You must have needed that medicine, hey?
Oh, I haven't had dead birds since just fall into my lap like that. But I did the dream arc, which is all about connecting into right brain intuition and connecting to the wild, animal kingdom. And so these animals have a lot of meaning to me because they send me messages that I need at the time. And so including that in my jewellery is a part of that. It's reminding me of strength when I need it, or farsightedness, or whatever it is. So yeah. I don't even think I included those stories in the book, but
no. Yeah. Well, we've got something extra special.
Yes.
Well, about the book. Now, if somebody wants to get a copy, where do they go?
It's through my website. So it is an ebook at the moment. I have the consideration of turning it into a little guidebook, or an actual paper copy that you can keep in your bag, because in the book I also have little recommendations of what to consider when you're making a purchase. Yeah. And also the measurement card if you want to get things made for you by a sewer. I've even recommended, like, you could reach out to a fabric store that sells ethical fabrics or remnant fabrics and get a sewer to make garments for you if you don't sew yourself. So I used to do that through my store, so that's why the measurement card was put in there. I used to give my customer, like, take all their measurements, keep it on file, and then they could order from afar. So on the website, I'll give you a link to include if you like to put that in your show notes.
Yeah. Do you want to just say the name of the website for the recording note?
So it's creatorsnest.com.au. Creators being, and it's no apostrophes, it's all one word, creatorsnest.com.au.
Thank you for that. All right. We've probably talked our little toes off, I'd say.
Yes.
So can I just say thank you so much for your time today. It's been really, really great chatting with you, and I love the stories. It's super cool. And, thank
you.
So much for
it's
time.
Such a pleasure. It's clearly something I'm passionate about, so I'm more than happy to talk about it.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
all right, I reckon we'll end up chatting again one of these days, not too distant future.
Absolutely.
So ciao for now.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.